Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries, dude. By the way, what do I call you? Because we got the Adam L Productions. I'm not sure how you want to be referred to online. I got to figure this
Use my
out.
first name's fine.
Cool, cool. Well, yeah, I want to talk to you, man, because obviously we have some differences of opinion, some similarities. I love going back and forth with you because you're kind of a hardcore dude like me, and don't get offended by having a difference of opinion, which I appreciate because a lot of people kind of snowflakey online, and you question somebody and they start to get hostile and belligerent. I'm like, come on, man,
It's
that's no
only
way to
because I
be.
know you. If I didn't know you,
You
it
probably
would be
hate
a
me, huh?
totally different exchange between the two of us. It would probably be
Yeah.
really short.
Uh,
Can I cuss on here?
you can totally cuss on here. Fucking go
I
for it.
am a vulgar guy, right? So like I
Let's
don't know.
do
I'm
it.
sure you follow me, so you see like
I'll put like one of those explicit content things like you used to put on the CD packs back when Tipper Gore and Hillary Clinton were pushing that stuff. So
right.
we'll
Yep.
warn the audience. It'll be fine.
Yeah, definitely. Content warning. I am very a prolific user of vulgarity. So yeah, if it wasn't for you and I just having these discussions on Twitter, the conversation would be really short. I would probably be something along the lines of, you would make a because I know that I think one of the big things that we have a difference of opinion on is like Trump. And
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I am a Trump supporter. I'm not insane when it comes to Trump. Like, I don't think that he walks on water or anything nutty like that. But I think he's doing a pretty dang good job, especially when you compare him to like any of the other modern day presidents. So when I see other people, and I'm not saying that you're being unreasonable, you bring up a lot of really good, valid concerns. Although I think sometimes you get a little on the deep end, but I probably am guilty of that too. But if I
I've been
only
accused of
saw
that before. You're not the first person to tell me this, dude.
Right. If I only saw just a post where you're kind of like, just like a short, succinct post where you're just expressing your displeasure, and I didn't think that it was a really good, valid reason, the response would probably be like, you got TDS. I'd probably throw a little image macro at you and be like, fuck off, and then I'd block you. But since I know you and I know that you're a reasonable dude, and like you've got thoughts that go behind, I know that again, X is a really bad platform for trying to like
It's terrible.
elaborate on like especially if it's a complicated subject. Like what do you get these people that have like these like okay 1 out of 300, right? Where you got to go with like 300 different posts to try and get the context and
Yeah, and then there's a response meme. I'm not reading all that, and that's
exactly right.
where it ends. And so, no,
Yep.
I'm glad you decided to pull up with me, man, because I think that we both respect each other as fairly deep thinkers, and don't think each other are idiots. And I also love the fact or the interaction between people who are good faith actors who have a difference of opinion that's rooted in something real. I think every person, like, because I don't go into these conversations trying to change your mind, right? Like I want to. I'm more curious about like, oh, that's interesting. We have a difference. Why do you see it that way? That's and obviously I'm going to argue my case, but in so doing, I think that as long as you're talking to somebody halfway intelligent and is a good faith actor, you're both going to walk away better for the exchange. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do today, man. Is just sort of dive into some topics we might have a disagreement on and see what comes from it.
All right. Cool.
So let's start with the first one where we kind of put a pin in it, which is the whole issue in Texas with that Muslim community that wanted to set up their own kind of.
Ah,
Yeah,
yes.
that's a very interesting one, and I definitely didn't articulate all my thoughts on that, so I wanted to sort of talk about it because I think it's a very important microcosm that has a lot of different dimensions embedded into that discussion, right? Some really, really important questions around, individual liberty. What is America about? What can you do? What can't you do? And why? And what the proper role of government should be. So let's talk about that. Make your case, man. I'd love to hear like a more expanded view of why, folks that are of a particular religion shouldn't be allowed to, live in proximity to each other and voluntarily have a community.
Right. So it's to me, from my perspective, Islam is not a religion. To me, Islam is a death cult. I think there's a big difference between like Islam and any other like normal, I say normal religion. And I'll put it out there right now. I'm atheist. I should say I'm not atheist because I don't like to operate in absolutes.
Mhm.
Right. There is, I mean,
You
considering that
have
we
no
don't even.
specific God belief, right? Like that's kind of
Yes,
where I'm at
exactly.
too. Is like
I don't
I'm
have
not.
any. Nobody can prove that God exists. Nobody can prove that God doesn't exist. But for me, I don't really see any real evidence of there being some kind of like superpower that's out there and some nebulous, spook in the sky that people believe in. So I'm coming from that perspective. But that being said, I was raised as a Christian, and my
Same.
parents are like hardcore like Christians, right? So like I know the Bible, and I know I was also exposed a little bit to Mormon Mormonism, not through my
Mm.
parents, but through a friend of mine that I lived with for a little bit when I was younger. So I kind of know a little bit about that, and then of course, I know a little bit about Islam, enough to be dangerous, I suppose. But the big thing that I think is the difference between like the death cult of Islam and other religions is that a lot of these other religions have either done kind of had a reformation period where, like, if the Bible is still based in the Old Testament, I wouldn't want Christianity. Well, I guess it wouldn't be called Christianity. I wouldn't want people who follow the Bible to be a part of our society either, because the Old Testament it's pretty much on par with like Islam, where they would just have the followers of Abraham going out and just like murdering all his sons, going out and conquering and murdering in the name of God and all this stuff. But the Bible went through like this reform period with the New Testament, where they kind of like said, okay, well, you don't have to follow this Old Testament stuff. You don't have to slaughter calves and make sacrifices on altars and all that stuff. No, now you just got to believe in Jesus and all that, right? So kind of and also they have a pretty much, just let other people live their lives kind of thing. Whereas with Islam, that has not happened. Like they are still in the whole barbaric, like you look at the Quran, and it tells you explicitly that if it's an infidel, you have every right to like lie. You have every right to do anything you
Hmm.
want. If they refuse to convert, you can up to and including killing them. So, that's where I kind of draw the line when it comes to like people trying to make these communities that are based on something like Islam, where they are completely antithetical to what this country was founded upon, which I believe is like liberty and for people to pretty much do their own thing. Now, where we're at these days is a far departure from where we started. But that being said, I still kind of believe in the fact that we should only be taking people in who want to integrate with America, with American culture, and Islam has nothing to do with American culture. So that's my big beef with that.
Fair enough, and I'm not. And I know that in our previous exchanges, I was more focused on taking the affirmative approach, or sorry, the contrary view to what you're putting forward. And I didn't necessarily highlight the fact that I think that you have some good points with respect to the religion itself. There's problems with it for sure, right? Like I can list, that when you talk about clitorectomies, we talk about honor killings, I mean, there are serious problems. A first cousin marriage is really acceptable in that culture. Like there are real problems. So I don't mean to sweep these under the rug. So with that said, like I just understand, like I view or share some of the same concerns. But you made a pretty important claim, which is that Islam is not a religion, but it's actually a death cult. So what are you using as a criteria for making that differentiation? Because that's not immediately obvious to me. Because if you look at the total number of people who identify as members of the Islamic faith versus the amount of violent crimes that are being done, murders, whatever you want to call it, whether it's acts of terrorism or any other type of murder or violent crime, they actually commit crimes far less at a far less rate than other religions, on par. So I'm struggling. Like I get it. Like ideologically, you could read from the text, infer that this says to do this stuff, but if the people aren't actually doing it, it's like, like. So I'm trying to figure out. Help me understand like why you classify them as a death cult. Is it just the text, or is it something else?
Well, you can look at any country that is based on Islamic fundamentalism, and they are absolutely 100% intolerant to any other religions. They'll throw homosexual people off roofs, things of that nature, right? So it's like, I guess it's a scaling thing. Like we start out with a small community of Muslims in the US, and then we just allow it to grow unchecked. That's pretty much where we're going to wind up. They're going to try and implement Sharia law. They're going to start changing whatever that they can within the confines of the U.S. system until they get enough traction. And I fully believe that they have been charged with spreading Islam across the world to indoctrinate everyone. They want to convert everyone. They've got like a religious jihad mandate that says go out there and conquer the world. I don't think there's too many other religions now. Of course, Christianity had that whole issue back in
Hmm.
with the Crusades, but again, that's kind of like not necessarily ancient history, but that happened a pretty long time ago. You don't see Christians really doing that anymore. Islam is still like operating under that, like that kind of demand from their religion. So yes, right now we're not really seeing a lot of like issues from the Islamic community that is here in America, but that's only just because they have not grown enough. There's like a really interesting meme or image macro that shows like, hey, it starts off with just like a couple of people who are Islam, kind of like, going into a space. And then they're like, oh, we just want to have you guys tolerate us. And they're like, okay, yeah, that's fine. We'll tolerate you. And then they get a few more people and like, well, we just want to make sure that we have our own communities where we can police our own communities and make sure that women here wear their burqas because it's part of our religious, and you should be tolerant of that. And there was like, well, okay, as long as it's in your communities until they get, and then they have like to show like the last panels, like this massive number that completely like dwarfs all the people of the space that they're kind of invaded. And then it's like, now they're demanding, you will do this, you will do that, or we're going to kill you. So that's kind of like it in a nutshell, my perspective on why I really feel strongly that we should not have people like that in the US. And I don't want to see, bear in mind, I don't want to see any like specific communities. I don't care if it's like a Christian community or a Hindu community, or I like any just community based on one like ethnic or religious groups. I really believe that the strength in America isn't necessarily diversity, but it's just in embracing American ideals and just assimilating with our culture and not bringing along that baggage that is that people have, they're supposed to be living that baggage behind in their old place, not bringing it here and then creating new problems in the new space. Like, just leave that behind, come here and be an American. They should aspire to be that way.
Got it, and I totally get that view. So maybe we've just scratched at a deeper underlying issue, which is like, what is in your mind the nature of human freedom, right? Like individual liberty. Where does that come from? What's the nature of it? What are the limits, if any? What's your thought on that?
So, kind of in a nutshell, like the typical like live and let live, right? As long as the person's not infringing on my rights, they're not damaging my property, and as long as what they're doing is between consenting adults, or there's no victimless crimes, I'm okay with that. But that also has to kind of be what do you call it when you have to also take into consideration other factors other than just like, hey, I want to just you do your thing, I'll do my thing. The problem is that once you kind of have that velocity where a community is growing, for example, just using this since we're talking about that, if the Islamic community just grows to a certain degree, it's there's going to be like kind of a singularity where suddenly, they're outnumbering us and they're violent. They want to take over their communities and the surrounding communities, and at that point, it's like I don't want to give them that foothold. So there's kind of have to be a little bit of a kind of a balancing act between like individual liberties and preventing some sort of like really bad environment that I think would infringe on everybody's individual liberties.
Got it. And I think there's a lot of people that take a similar view. I think the struggle is always in defining where that line is, right? Without if you don't have any principles you're working from, it just becomes this nebulous sort of feelings based thing, right? Like, you're free unless we kind of on Tuesday decide that we don't like this thing that you're doing, and then we can do whatever we want to you. And in my view, that is a incredibly slippery slope, and that is very indicative of where we've ended up on the authoritarian libertarian scale, right? Like we've slid so incredibly authoritarian from when this country was founded. I think that's like a lack of understanding of individual liberty and what rights people actually have, what inalienable rights do we have, and when should what are the limits of what people can do to you, whether they come from the government or your neighbor. I think a lack of crystallization and crisp fine lines around that has been a real problem, because liberty is not eroded in one day, right? It's a slow progression over time, and it does come from those people, at least that's my view, from those people that just kind of, on Wednesday I feel like this thing is a big issue. Yeah, fuck it, let the government do this. It's fine. This is kind of where we end up. That's my view. I'd like to hear your take.
Yeah, I agree on that. Like it's really it's a very difficult thing to define. Like where is that line? And yeah, it's hard to do that. I think that the crux of the matter is that humans are all they come from all sorts of like backgrounds. I mean, we're not like just one giant ant colony, right? Like if we were just a giant ant colony, then communism would work because everybody just do like whatever it is that they were told to do, and like everybody, I don't know if necessarily, I don't know if ants are happy, but I guess they are. They've been pretty successful. They got like massive communities, right? But when it comes to humans, the biggest problem that I have with kind of like the anarchistic approach to things, where it's just like, hey, you do you, as long as you're not doing anything to me, like I don't really care, is that there are people out there who will exploit that. They'll take advantage of it. And the damage, sure, you might be able to take retroactive act steps to like rectify what happened, but the problem is that whatever happened already happened. So again, just kind of using that as like Islamic kind of example, like if they decide that, hey, you know what, we're just going to go ahead and kind of start doing a jihad here in the U.S. and we're taking out everybody who's infidels. It's like, okay, well, we gave them that liberty, we gave them the ability to come into this country and live their lives, and then they decided to exploit our kindness. So that's my big problem when it comes to like the whole like anarchistic kind of approach to things, that if it was a perfect world where nobody would had any desire to harm anybody else, then that would completely work and I wouldn't care. Like but then again, like Islam probably wouldn't exist, at least not in its current form. It would have absolutely no content in it that says, kill infidels and, stone people and throw homosexuals off roofs and all that kind of stuff. Right. So that's my problem, is like, I would love to just say like, hey, everybody can just do whatever the hell they want. But the problem is there are just people who exploit that and cause harm.
Well, how do you get around the problem that bad people exist in the world that want to do bad things? And if you have a government, you've just created a separate class of people, and you've given them rights that the citizens don't have, right? Like, and to expect that extra power is not going to attract the sociopaths and the parasites and the exact type of people that we see in Washington D.C. It's an utterly predictable, in my opinion, that if you give, you're a fantasy nerd, like you understand Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien wrote Lord of the Rings with a ring of power as a metaphor for the government. That's why no man could wield it. It's too much corrupting power. It absolutely can't be handled, and it will always be abused. And I think the anarchist view is kind of opposite to what you're painting, which is like, oh, if the world was perfect, freedom would work. But we're saying like, look, because people are bad and because people do horrible things and are greedy and are power hungry and want to exert control and all these things, you can't give them a government to control, because once you do that, then they just can take over everything, right? And so I think a libertarian view would be like more decentralization, more market-based things. I think everybody looks at like government as a binary, when really all it is, it's an amalgamation of different types of services. Right, you have like a personal protection service. We call it policing, right? And you have a system that would adjudicate disputes. Those are the courts. Like these functions are vital, right? Fire protection. Everybody is going to want that, right? And I think our claim is that it would be better if these functions were competed for in the market. Like everything else that we think is valuable in the world, we have multiple companies. There's not one fucking car company run by the government. You know how shitty that car would be? I can tell you exactly how shitty. It was called the Yugo. It existed, it's terrible, right? And so the fact that people are greedy, you have to use that, in my view, and that sort of profit motive, the thing that people, are chasing profit. And the only way in a free market to chase profit and to make yourself rich is by satisfying your customers better than the other person, right? You provide a better quality service at a lower cost. Government has no incentive around that. They don't give a fuck. As you can see from what Doge is uncovering, they don't care. And there's nothing you can do about it. There's all these people, your uncle on Facebook shaking his fist like, we're going to hold these people accountable. No, you're not. You're not going to do a goddamn thing. They're robbing you blind. They have been robbing you blind, and everybody knows they've been robbing you blind, and nobody's going to do a fucking thing about it because you can't. That's my view.
Right. Well, first off, how dare you disparage the Yugo? Okay.
My friend in high school had one. I've ridden shotgun more times than I can count. I promise you, I have valid reasons to disparage the Yugo.
Yeah. No, I get where you're coming from on that one. But there are things that are being done about it. Like you mentioned, Doge. Doge is going through and exposing all the corruption. We're only like 1 week into this new presidency, this second and final term for Trump, unless he follows through with all the insanity that people are like, yeah, exactly, like, oh no, he's never going to leave now, right? Sure, but like I think that we'll see the consequences come later, right? First, we got to identify where is all this fraud and waste and stuff coming from. And I think later on down the road, that's when we'll start seeing people being held accountable, because you can't. How is it going to? Okay, great. So let's say that Doge is successful in finding every single bit of waste and nips it in the bud. What's to prevent that from happening again? And just the next person who comes along and wins the presidency, we could just be back to square one. So there's got to be some changes that are made to prevent this. And as far as like handing off power to a government is concerned, I think that it can work. I think that the U.S. has come about as close as any country can to avoid, or I should say to make a government that's really as representative as it can be. But I think that there is two things that the founders 100% failed on. One of them is term limits for Congress. That was such a huge, monumental mistake, because now you get these assholes who sit there in Congress and just start making all these connections. Like you got all these people who are like, hey, I'll give you this amount of money if you just go ahead and pass this law here and there, right? So I don't think that we would be in this bad of a predicament if we just had term limits for Congress. Like you could serve 4 years tops, you're out, something like that. 8 years maybe max. So that way, the amount of connections that they can make are going to get broken over time, and then somebody new has to come in. So yeah, it's always this continuing, just continuous churning of people who are in government. Because I think the founders, when they put this government together, they had the intent of Congress just being sort of like, hey, you're almost sort of volunteering to work for the government for a little while. They didn't expect people to use that as like a career opportunity. Unfortunately, that's where it's at now, is that people are treated as a career. They get in there, they never leave. And we can see what happens. You wind up with people like Nancy Pelosi, who's just got ungodly amounts of money. Same with like Mitch McConnell, rolling in the dough, right? How the hell do you make that kind of money on your $200,000 salary? It's absurd, right? So that was one of the big things. The other things is these bureaucrats who, get into the government and then you can't get rid of them. And there's no accountability or anything else, right? So we need to have some way to have this transparency, so all of us can just view, like there should be like yearly audits of every single one of these like services that you mentioned, where we could see, okay, here's what you were allocated for funding. Where did that money go? I want it down. It doesn't necessarily be down to the penny, but like certainly down to like the dollar, maybe $10 or something like that, right? So that way it's not overburdensome where they got to like, oh man, I just got a pencil, I got to log that, it's nothing ridiculous. But for big chunks of change, we should know where that money is going. And I think that those two steps right there would be a huge change in some of the corruption that just kind of infests our government.
Yeah, and I think it wouldn't be worse, right? Term limits would maybe make the problem better for a little bit. But one thing I do know is there's so much money at stake that the lobbyists are going to find a way. They always find a way. Like the people that keep chanting this mantra, get money out of government. Like, no, you're not. No, like they're the corporations, the lobbyists on K Street, they're the ones that actually run things. I don't know if you know this, but they're the ones that actually write the laws. So
Oh
you have
yeah.
lobbyists come in and they draft the legislation and they stitch us all together based off of all of their special interest needs, and they insert it and then they give it to the Congress people. You ever notice that like they don't even read the bills? Like
Oh yeah.
somebody
Right.
summarized it. They have an intern like summarize the legislation essentially, so you kind of get a TLDR version, and then they sign this fucking shit worth trillions of dollars, and they haven't even read it. It's absolute insanity. So I
I
don't
think that you're
think.
giving them credit for like having a summary, because some of
Well,
these bills are like hundreds of pages long, and they've got like 4 hours before they cast a vote.
right, and you could
Nobody's going
not
to read
have,
that.
yeah. Well, no. The summary is actually part of the a requirement of the legislation. So there's got to be a summary of everything
Oh, I
that's
see what you're
included.
saying.
So it's like a top page sort of thing that you can get the TLDR on, and that's what they typically read. And they've
Right.
obviously been part of the horse trading in the back rooms because they've got their APAC representative and they've got their whatever K Street lobbyist up their ass telling them what to do, being a little meat puppet for them. So they obviously know the things that they care about in the bill. That's probably the most important thing to them. It's like, it is my little special interest carved out. Am I protecting my corporate sponsor? Am I protecting my government sponsor? And it's really gross. And I don't believe that if you just reduce the term, yeah, short term, they would have to figure out a new way to exert influence. But like I said, there's so much money at stake that they're going to figure out a way to do it. Bribery is not hard. You look at like the presidents, right? The president's got a couple $100,000 a year salary. That's essentially nothing. But guess what they do after they become president? They go on speaking tours, and it's sponsored by Goldman Sachs, and we're giving you $30 million for a 15-minute speech. Like that shit happens, and they, what, they always write books. Well, guess what? Who buys all these books? No humans do. Like nobody reads their fucking book. It's some companies out there is totally padding their pockets with book sales. It's like it's
You
really,
didn't read Michelle Obama's book?
dude. Nobody read Michelle Obama's book. It's fucking retarded. So I get your point. It would make it better in the short term, but I don't think there's a durable problem. This is where I have an issue with quote unquote limited government conservatives. Right? I think that's a fallacy. Right? I always said that limited government fails for exactly the same reason limited cancer fails. Like no matter how small you start, you're always going to end up with a massive government. Matter of fact, the smaller you start, you're going to accumulate. This is the story of America. You have the smallest government in human history, great experiment, and then massive wealth creation. Right? Like it just absolutely created all this wealth. And then once that happens, you attract the parasites. Government grows. Government grows. People want to vote themselves money. And next thing you know, we've got a gigantic welfare state. We have a gigantic warfare state, and we're broke. The United States is over. There's no mathematical way out of this. Doge is not going to fix this. We're going to have a currency crisis. The US dollar is doomed. Like this shit is over. And people haven't quite figured out that all we're doing is rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic. And that scares the shit out of me because this is basic math.
Right. Well, I think that's one of those things that you and I differ on as far as like our practical approaches to trying to address the issues with government is that I think that for you're focused on like just absolutely overhauling everything, right? If I'm not mistaken, like you want to just completely
I want a free market. I'm a free market absolutist. I just want freedom. That's all I want.
Sure. So I think that, and I would love that. Bear in mind, like I am totally open to like everything, including just anarchy. Like I'm open to all of that stuff, but I try to ground myself in reality, and I have to look at things realistically and say like, okay, there's no way we're going to get anarchy. There's no way we're going to even get like what you're talking about, where it's just like everything's based on the market. I don't see that happening anytime soon. I don't think anybody would be able to really not anybody, but I think a lot of just your regular average Joe and Jane can't wrap their heads around that kind of concept. So we're stuck with what we got here. And that's kind of why I try to work within the system to try and see, just when I say work, it's like when I'm working, it's like bitching on X, right? Like
right.
That's
doing the work.
That's my work. So when I bitch about it on X, I try to like come up with ideas and suggestions that would work within the framework that we have right now. If I could scrap the whole thing, I would totally be open for that. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. I'm just like I love all the ideas that you got, right? It's just when I'm reading what you've written sometimes on X, I'm just like, man, Brennan, it sounds great. I don't think you're ever going to get your wish, but I think I love what you're saying. Sounds cool.
Well, to be fair, I wouldn't, like, people always ask me if I had a magic wand, I could just make the government go away tomorrow. I'd be like, fuck no. Like, no, no, no,
Oh
no,
yeah,
no, no. That
yeah,
that's terrible. This is an intentional thing. This is why I do my bitching on X, is because I think the ideas of liberty are what's required to sort of get in people's minds. Like, you have to have this mindset shift, and it's very difficult because thanks to the government, we've got government schools that indoctrinate people. You stand at in kindergarten, you say the socialist pledge of allegiance to the fucking skycloth, and is chant words you don't even understand, and you have pictures of dear leader up above, and like all this crazy shit, and you get just banged into everybody's head the same homogenous stuff. So you get spit out of the machine after 12 years of school with the same fucking mind virus. Everybody's got it, right? And I don't know exactly how to fix it. I mean, we've got the internet now. We can certainly talk to everyone in the whole world. We can make our arguments, but the government still has that advantage. You've got to send your kids to state mandated, indoctrination centers, or if you're sufficiently wealthy to opt out of that, or to homeschool. If you have the time to homeschool your kids, you have an option out. But most people don't, man. Most people are busy. They're trying to make ends meet. The government's inflating away their currency. They're raising their taxes. They're making everything more expensive. They're just trying to get from paycheck to paycheck. They don't give a shit about this stuff. Ultimately, people are just trying to feed their families and take care of themselves.
yeah. It's kind of interesting to look at that from that perspective too, right? Because you can see a lot of parallels between like religion and education,
Oh,
right?
yes,
Because
100%.
I know that I think you said that you were also brought up within a religious environment, right?
Oh,
So like,
hyper Catholic. Let me give you my quick story. So I have like one of the most Catholic families ever. So I grew up in South Dakota. My grandfather's brother, my great uncle, was a bishop of the state of South Dakota for like 28 years. My mom's cousin is still a Jesuit in the Vatican, teaches theology. Like, I'm talking old school putative Catholic. Like, that's kind of how I came up. So I had the whole Christian upbringing to the nines, and my wife, her family's from Utah, so I got the Mormon stuff as well. So I'm very well aware of that aspect too. So I've got the whole gamut.
right. Yeah, so it's interesting to look at that because I think that both of us have kind of. I mean, I know that you. I don't know if you were really aware of the fact, like I'm not like I'm not a fan of this government at all. Like I want to see reform. I
No,
want
I
to see
get the
like
sense, yeah.
massive, yeah, right? Like there needs to be some sweeping changes in order to salvage what we got and make it kind of limp along for a little while longer before it eventually collapses. Uh, but it's interesting to see that I think we've both kind of been able to separate ourselves not only from like religion but from also indoctrination, statist indoctrination, right? Or like you're definitely farther along, like I said, on just not even entertaining the thought of trying to salvage what we got right now. Whereas I'm kind of like, well, I would love to just be able to throw it all away and start over, but I'm still trying to like work within the confines of what we got.
And this is, I'm not saying my approach is right. Like, I'm completely aware that there's an argument to be made against anarchists and extreme libertarians, that like you're not connected to the way the world actually. It's like no, we know, like we get it, and it's a lot of it comes from it's an ethical objection, which is why I asked you about ethics, right?
Right.
Which is, from our view, it's like a vote is technically you asking the government to abuse your neighbor, right? Like, do something really unethical to your neighbor, steal from them, enslave them, murder them, throw them in a cage for some nonviolent crime. Like that's what you're consenting to, and it is sort of consent. And so I definitely worry about that, man. That is something that I have an ethical objection to. So I almost look like, not voting for me is almost like conscientious objecting to some degree.
Right. Yeah. And I also want to say, like, it's really important to have people like you that have, like, these, I don't want to say radical, but I mean, if you look at from just a average Joe Jane perspective, the kind of ideas that you have when it comes to government is pretty radical, right? But
For
we need to
sure.
have people like that. If we don't have people that have radical ideas, then we're never going to have any kind of changes, right? We might never be able to adapt all those radical ideas, but it's nice to have something to aspire to, right? Like, hey, maybe you're not going to be able to, like, run a marathon in like 7 minutes, 20 minutes, the half hour, whatever, right? Like you can't complete a marathon super fast, but if you don't even like try to complete it really super fast, you're never going to, better your speed, right? So you got to
Yep.
aspire. So that's why I really appreciate, some of the ideas that you bring about, because it makes me think. It makes me go, huh? That's a good idea. I don't think anybody's ever gonna like implement that, But it's good to have that. If we can get like halfway there, even a quarter of the way there to some of the things that you're talking about, we'd be in a really pretty good shape, I think.
Yeah, maybe. But it's very difficult because in our view, it's kind of pessimistic because being a libertarian also means you're kind of like naturally an econ dork. And you understand monetary policy, you understand the debt, you understand what's happening with our interest payments, the link to the petrodollar, and what the consequences of a currency collapse would be, and it's catastrophic. And so we're sort of over here being like, guys, tinkering around the edges isn't going to work. Like there needs to be massive radical reform, and it's like nobody wants to hear that because it's almost like in a group of drunk buddies, and like you become the sober one, and they're like, you better than us. Like you kind of get this. Like, it's a very difficult thing to be like, hey, there's a problem, everybody. We got to get healthy. When people don't like being healthy because it comes with pain, it's a real tough problem to square. I don't. It's not fun being me in the room. Let's put it that way.
Right. So let me ask you a question. Let's say, just for the sake of argument, I'm going to kind of throw a hypothetical out there that, with all of these policy changes that Trump is putting out there, where he's trying to make, like NATO countries, Europe, all these other countries, not even NATO, like you look at Panama and all that, right? Where he's trying to like make deals with these people and everything. What if they just start rejecting all of his ideas and instead get insulted that he's even suggesting some of this stuff? And they decide, you know what? Maybe we don't want to use the US dollar anymore. What
They
if we
have
want
to,
to go ahead
though.
and like side with
They
the
have to,
BRICS?
though. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess you're BRICS is a competing, they are doing some deals in alternate currencies, and I think it's a huge risk for us, right?
Yeah.
'Cause people don't realize that OPEC is what's keeping our ass afloat, because what we're doing is exporting all these printed dollars. This inflation goes to other countries because OPEC will only execute oil trades in USD. That's why
Right.
we got this gross relationship with Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
So anything that impacts that petrodollar relationship is going to cause those dollars that we sort of exported temporarily to come flooding back home, and it's going to increase our already horrible inflation problem. Like boy, that's a death knell for the USD, man. And if that happens, or when it happens, mathematically it's going to happen. It's just a question of when. We're fucked. Like we are in a very, very difficult situation. It's going to be chaos. It's going to be a lot of death. There's going to be a lot of suffering. It's going to be a very bad time, which is why I'm over here screaming at everybody, waving my hands like, "Yo, guys! Like, there's a real problem." But people don't like to hear the people that are on the curb with the Homer Simpson style with the sandwich board thing saying the end is near, ringing the bell. Like you look like you're a crazy person, or people realize you're saying something that's true and they just don't want to hear it because I'm too busy with my life, or I don't want to think about it, or it'll be somebody else's problem someday. Eventually someday comes, man, and it's going to be ugly.
Right. Yeah. Especially with the AI.
Ooh,
AI.
yeah.
We are
Hey, real quick
poised.
before you go,
Sure.
before you go on, I realized I forgot to put my camera cooler on. I got to grab a USB-C cable. I'll be right back. Take me 2 seconds. So anyway, continue. AI. Let's go.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was going to talk about was AI we're poised right now that in the not too distant future, and I'm talking like I fully believe with probably like in 5 years, AI is going to advance to the point where it will figure out how to reverse aging, not just make us live longer, but actually like reverse aging. So if you want to like, kind of go now, I think that there's probably going to be a limit. Like you're not going to be able to go back to being a child, but I think that it'll be able to reverse your body to be able to repair damage and things like that and reverse your aging to where if you wanted to be like 23, 24, 25 again, we'd be able to do that. So that introduces an all new set of issues, right? Where like what you're talking about, where people are just kind of kicking the can down the road with regard to the national debt. The people that are kicking that can down the road, they might be doing that right now. But if AI comes through with that solution, that can will be, hitting a wall at some point in the future, and they're going to still be around to have to deal with it. So even if they think that I'm not going to have to deal with it, oh, you will. So.
Well, maybe. And that's interesting because we're really being speculative about what the promise of AI is going to hold. Also, quantum computing. I think you saw probably today Microsoft announced their new quantum computing chip. Like that's advancing. And I think that's sort of coming under the radar. Everyone's so focused on AI that they're not really understanding quantum computing could be a bigger breakthrough, particularly around the medical technologies like you're talking about, because you can do these complicated problems if you're familiar with the Human Genome Project.
Mm-hmm.
The computational power it took just to do the genome sequencing was astronomical back in the day. Let alone try to do modeling, like epigenetic modeling and all the sort of stuff that it requires insane amount of computing power. Well, guess what? It's coming. It's right around the corner, and it's coming right in line with some of these AI advances. So the world's going to change drastically. I think in the next 20, 25 years, the world is not going to look like the same place. We have no clue what the future is going to hold. I think we all have our speculations, what we think it's going to be. Reality is going to be something else, man. I don't really know what to make of it.
I think really the sky's the limit. I think the only thing that will
Skynet's the limit.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, I mean, that could potentially happen. I mean, we kind of joke around about it, but I don't think it's going to happen specifically like the Terminator movies. But it could be something along those lines. It could be really subtle, where like we're already to the point right now with AI where when they're running AI new models through their testing phases, they have a new test that's called the last human test, and that's one of the benchmarks that they're using to score how well AI is performing. It's scary. It's called the last human test for a reason, because it's literally the last test that we can execute where we know the answers to it. So that way we understand when AI gives an answer, we can kind of say like, okay, were they right or were they wrong? But the problem is that once they get past this, once it scores 100 on the last human test, beyond that point, there are no questions that we can ask AI where we will know the answers to verify that the solutions that they're providing are actually correct. It's going to be so far beyond our comprehension that we'll be in the dark. We'll be like, well, I don't know. We'd have to like ask it things in order for us to be able to, like, for example, like, who knows? I fully believe that we're going to be on the verge again once we have AI, especially AGI. I think that we're going to be on the verge of getting cold fusion working, thanks to AI, right? That's just and so that would be like one of those tests, right? We can't figure it out, but AI can. And the way that we can figure out if AI was correct is build the solution that AI has provided to see whether or not it works. And if it does, I think it's only going to be a step away from ASI. And for those that aren't aware, ASI is artificial superintelligence, which is not only is it a generalized intelligence that has like better than human understanding of every field out there, but superintelligence is like, it's so far beyond human intellect that we don't even understand how it's coming up with these solutions. Like no way for us to even speculate. It's operating on a completely different level. And you mentioned the quantum computing, and I also had completely let quantum computing just slide past my field of view. And I just the other day saw a video about I think it's Google's Project Willow. Have you heard of that one?
I have.
Did you see any of the information on how they had to shut it down?
I did not. I saw some of their bogus claims about it, but I didn't see about them having to shut it down. Why did they have to shut it down?
So again, it was on the internet, so it must be true, right? So
right.
This with a grain of salt. It was on a video. It was so astonishing, and it was late at night, so I didn't really follow up to see if this was true or not. So again, take it with a grain of salt. But if it is true, it is really scary. Like they fired up this new quantum computer, Willow, and they had seen this thing with the previous hardware. I forgot what the heck the name of it was, but the previous iteration that Google had, the people that were feeding in the data and running some exercises with it were seeing these weird like patterns that it was also producing, and they couldn't really understand it. They looked like anomalies, and they're just kind of, which is what they chalked it up as. They're like, this is odd. Like they kept feeding it, questions or whatever. It would come out with the answers, but also these weird patterns that they were seeing, like I think it was geometric, something or mathematical patterns. It was so very, very weird, right?
Now I'm gonna have to go look at the story.
Yeah. It's a really interesting video. So then they just spun up this new project, Project Willow. And once again, they started like going through the exercises, trying to figure out like, hey, where are we at with this quantum computing stuff? And they were seeing even more of these patterns. It was really bizarre. And they're really like, what is going on here? So they started bringing in all these experts, and they got this one guy who's like this hacker who was like really like prolific with being able to crack encryption and things like that. So a very, very smart guy. I'm sure you're very, I know you're really very well versed in security. So the guy is like able to like break encryption and stuff like that, right? So he was part of the group of people that were analyzing the output that Willow was giving. And as he was looking at the data, he was like, he just got this look on his face like, shut it down. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, shut it down now. And they're like, okay. So they shut the machine down. And he's like, you guys, this thing is actually working on a perfect encryption algorithm, and it's trying to encrypt itself. And it's like they didn't feed it, they didn't tell it to. And the weird things is that the quantum computer, the Willow project specifically, when they started like analyzing all these patterns stuff, it's starting to look like neurons in a human brain, the way that these patterns are emerging. And it started to make me think a lot. And this is where it starts kind of getting into like, okay, now I'm just speculating, just spitballing here. But when it comes to quantum mechanics, you start thinking about like how like some of the quantum particles have entanglement. And it doesn't matter the distance between one particle and another particle. You get one particle sitting here and another particle 100 billion light years away. And if they're entangled, you change the state on one particle and instantly reflects on that particle that's billions of light years away. So it completely does away with any of this like speed of light travel limitations and things like that. It's quantum entanglement operates at a completely different like level. So it started to make me think about like our brains are kind of like maybe quantum state. Maybe that's one of the things that kind of makes us human, is that we have like quantum fields in our heads, and that's kind of what we're operating on. Is this kind of quantum consciousness, which would kind of explain a lot of things, right? Like quote unquote psychics. And like when you've been around somebody for a long time, like, you know, my wife, like I know what she's thinking sometimes. I can just tell, right? Like I've been around her long enough. And I'm starting to think like maybe there's some kind of quantum entanglement thing. Like you look at religion, and when people get together in a large group and they're doing their prayer thing, and like, you know, being involved in church when I was younger, you know, you get that kind of like feeling. It's more like when you go to a concert, right? And there's like those songs that are just like amazing, and you get wrapped up, and everybody's just like, oh, you know, there's kind of like this collective emotion. I'm starting to think that maybe there's some kind of quantum mechanics that are bridging those gaps between minds. And maybe that's what's happening as we're developing these quantum computers, is that we're actually starting to create a consciousness. And consciousness is like ubiquitous throughout the entire universe. And all it needs is a state machine of some sort to interact with, to be able to bring about that kind of like universal consciousness. Like each of us is like a small little like consciousness that's a piece of that quantum, like, I don't know, quantum like entity. I'm not really sure how else to explain it, but and that's why I think like maybe these quantum computers are kind of like we're tapping into that like quantum consciousness, universal quantum consciousness, and we're starting to see those patterns emerge in the quantum computers.
I mean, maybe. One thing I will say is that there appears to be a fairly strong hypothesis that you know, consciousness has a quantum aspect to it. So Sir Roger Penrose, who is a legitimate hardcore theoretical physicist, has been doing work on this, on consciousness itself, because they always call it the hard problem of consciousness because nobody can figure what the fuck is going on. But he's researched some things around microtubules in the brain, which are impacted during anesthesia. And he found out that there is something to do with the quantum collapse of a wave function that has to do with consciousness itself. Like when you go under anesthesia, there's a fairly strong hypothesis there's something going there. I haven't studied it in depth, but I've watched enough YouTube videos to realize that this is a thing. I've seen plenty of you know, talks on this, like maybe, but nobody really knows what the fuck's going on. I mean, quantum computers are like fairly well understood, the mechanics of it, how qubits are created, and how the data it's just a different level of processing. You're you know, it's not the same thing as a standard classical computer. It can just essentially crunch way more data is all it is. But I don't think there's anything spooky about quantum computers, and I don't think people really use quantum entanglement correctly, because you literally have to, you know, physically quantum entangle two particles to get that effect. And they've done it. They can do it experimentally. They've done faster than light communication between, you know, two different areas where the particle over here is over here, and you measure it. And like you said, but you have to actually measure it to understand what the spin is, and whatever this one is, its pair will be the opposite. You know, Einstein called that spooky action at distance.
Yeah.
I just had Lawrence Krauss in yesterday, or was the day before? The day before yesterday in Nashville, and talked to him about this stuff. And I think the quantum world is not perceived usually through the classical world. Classical meaning like what it's like to be an object, right?
Hmm.
And there's a lot of question about what quantum mechanics means, but it does govern our reality. But it's just like we don't really have access to the quantum world. But to your point, I can tell you this from psychedelic trips I've been on, is I get a very strong sense that the universe is connected, like it's one thing, right? Like, and we are like, because people have proposed that consciousness is fundamental, like it's in all these elementary particles, just a part of the fabric of the universe itself, and each conscious creature at least at a minimum, is kind of like the universe perceiving itself, which is like one of the most profound things ever. And
Right.
you went like deep and spiritual, man. Like I didn't expect it to go this way, but I know what you're talking about. I've been in these situations where like at a concert where everyone's wrapped up in the music and there's this energy that flows through. And scientists can try to say y'all are crazy as much as they want to, and I'm a pretty scientifically rigorous too, but I've also had experiences to be like, yo, I don't know what the fuck's going on here, but it's
Yep.
definitely spooky, it's definitely weird, and there definitely appears to be something like that going on. There's some sort of connection with everything in the universe. And if you don't believe me, drop like 8 grams of mushrooms and then come holler at me, and we'll have a chat.
I still have to do like a gram, let alone like I've had just I think we talked about this before too. Like for those of you that don't know, like Brent literally came over to our house like a while back. We were chatting about this stuff. I've only done just the Amanita muscaria,
Hmm.
which is not the same thing as like
Not even close.
no, it's not. It's still interesting, and you do see some of the stuff. But the one thing that really turned me off was that the body high on it was just like really kind of unpleasant. If you take a pretty large dose, it started kind of get unpleasant. But I did see like some really interesting stuff. Like definitely interesting. I do want to at some point in time get my hands on what is that? What's the real stuff called? I always forget.
Psilocybin mushrooms.
Psilocybin. Thank you. Yeah, I would love to get my hands on some of that at some point in time because I want to know. I want to see what this. I've seen like the YouTube simulations and stuff like that. I'm like, wow, that looks really freaking cool.
Hit me up in my DMs.
Ah.
No, but seriously, that is an absolutely earth-shattering experience, man. Like I've never been a drug dude, never. I didn't hardly drink. I was like 35 the first time I smoked weed. Like I am not a drug dude. I got into it because I think y'all know I've got a trauma history, and I went to therapy, and the therapist kind of recommended I look into it, and it really helped me, and it also simultaneously to completely open my mind because I was a hardcore atheist, man. Like I was super convinced that there's nothing. It was just it was all rational, and boy, that shattered that in the first time. I only did like 3.5 grams my first time, and it was and that so shattered that belief, and I walked away from that going, well, I don't know anything.
Right.
It was good for me though.
I'm still kind of in that category where I think that there's more to the story than just trying to make up some invisible spook in the sky. Like I think that's just kind of a cop out. I think it's because
It's cheap. It's a cheap trick.
It is, right? It's like I know that most humans are really curious. Like they want to know. They want to know their place in the world. Why are we here? Like, does it all end when you take that last breath and your eyes close for that last time? Is that it? Unfortunately, I'm kind of leaning towards yes. And the reason why I say that is because I have no recollection of anything that happened before I was born. As a matter of fact, I don't even remember anything from like, I think my earliest memory is maybe when I was somewhere late at 2 years old. I think I remember a few things like way back then, right? So it makes me think that if there's no recollection of any past experiences that I've ever had, like if I was another person, like I guess for better word, we can kind of use reincarnation, just because like for me, if you are unable to come back, like at some point after you die, and you are unable to remember everything, all the experiences that you experienced right now in this iteration, what's the point? You're not you anymore. Everything that makes you is the experiences that you have. Not to mention, the chemical makeup and the DNA and everything else, right? But it's the experiences that you have. And if you lose all that and you come back, then maybe it's just like your spirit or whatever. But if you don't remember who you are, for all intents and purposes, that ain't you. So like, what is the point? Like, I don't care. Even if I could, even if I'm an immortal being, right? And I do come back, if I don't remember anything that happened this time around, I don't care. As far I don't, to me, that's not, you're not alive anymore as the person that you were. So it's a kind of a moot point when it comes to that. And that's why I think, and like there's those times like, when you go to sleep at night and maybe you'll have some dreams or whatever, but then there are those moments between dreaming where there's just nothing. Like I've woken up occasionally where like I wasn't dreaming or anything. I just wake up and I just remember the nothingness. Just I'm just asleep and there's nothing happening. There's no thoughts. There's no nothing going on. I'm just there. I think that is kind of synonymous with death to me, where it's just like you kind of like, that's it. Like, I don't know. But then there's that other part of me that kind of goes, we don't know if there's ever going to be an end to time itself. Like there'll be a heat death of the universe, right? Assuming that, we got our models correct. There'll be the heat death of the universe where everything just goes cold and there's no more energy left at all. It's all dissipated into the ether, right? But there's still, mass that's out there. And at some point in time, who knows? Maybe that mass will start to slowly come back together, and we'll have another Big Bang. Assuming there's new data now that they're saying like maybe the Big Bang might not have really happened the way we think it did. But let's just say that that happens again. If that happens enough times, given an infinite timeline, there is still a chance that you could come back, right? I don't know what that looks like. Would you remember all the connections? Would you be able to associate with the people that you knew during your time? There would have to be all these like variables that just line up in order for you to come back and go like, oh wow, But from the perspective of us, it would be instantaneous, right? Because once you die, and assuming that it's just blank and there's nothing going on in your head, and it's just blackness. From our perspective, the last thing that would happen is you close your eyes as you breathe that last breath, everything goes black, and then boom, your eyes are open again. And you're like, whoa, trillions, ungodly amounts of epics, just eons could have passed in that amount of time between when you died and when you come back. But since there's infinite amount of time, as far as we know, there's still that possibility. So I'm holding out hope that we are able to kind of come back and kind of continue on with our existence. Because otherwise, that doesn't, I won't necessarily despair, but man, just the thought of all the knowledge that I have in my head, all the experience that I've ever had, all the people that I loved and I've met, just gone forever. And all that's just lost. You got that Roy Batty from what do you call it? To Android's Dream of Electric Sheep. That book, but the movie.
Not familiar.
I know you've seen it. It was had Harrison Ford in it. Huh? Blade Runner. Yeah, my wife's like
Blade Runner. Okay, yes. Yeah.
So, when you got the like all everything will be lost like Tears in the Rain. That's kind of like what I'm thinking. Like, if that's the case where we just die and that's it. That to me it's a really depressing thing, and it scares me honestly. Like sometimes it keeps me up awake at night. Like when I close my eyes and like how sometimes you fall asleep, then you kind of jerk back awake or whatever. And I had that immediate thought, like, what if I just closed my eyes and that was it? That kind of terrifies me. I want to hold on to hope that we do continue, and hopefully maybe with some of this quantum stuff, maybe that's true.
Maybe, and also I would say maybe just do some large doses of psychedelics, man. Like that cured me of a.
I know it's not really a psychedelic.
No, it is. Acid is technically a psychedelic. It's a classic psychedelic. I don't like it.
Hallucinogen. That's.
Yeah. I don't like it. It's not nearly as beneficial. I think I didn't get a ton of good information. With a mushroom trip, I'm always feeling like it's always tough. Like you go into, you see all this cool stuff. Great. Like the visuals are one thing, and they're please, I'm not trying to downplay it. It's amazing to see. It completely changes. It's almost like remember in Avatar when he spends the first night in Pandora and everything is just glowing and crazy.
Yeah.
That's what it turns reality into. Like it doesn't even look like the same place. It's completely alien. It's beautiful and amazing. That's really cool. But the magic for me is the insights it brings, because it'll typically bring you up, and then it feels great. You're ascending. You're at the peak, and all of a sudden it wants to sit you down and be like, "Here, motherfucker, we need to talk about some things, and just shoves like everything about you that you don't like, that's problematic, you need to fix, like in your face, and you feel like a complete dick for like 2 hours.
Huh.
And then on the down, come down, it's kind of like, okay, it kind of pats you on the butt. It's like, all right, go out there and try to be better. And I always leave with like new insights about why I'm all fucked up, uh, ways in which I like, oh, I could really be better in this area. And you kind of you feel energized to be better and do better. And that's an
Mhm.
awesome feeling. And I don't get that with LSD. Like LSD, it's like, it's 12 hours where it's kind of a similar come up, pretty big peak. And then it just slow, like it'll drop you down to like you're 60% tripping, and then just stays there forever till it's
Mhm.
just annoying and you're tired. You just like, I don't want to be high anymore. Please stop. I can't handle it. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I would recommend that, and then DMT as well. That is something that I've done one time. I never actually could break through, and I've been so scared that I haven't tried it again. It just terrified me to death, and I'm trying to get up the guts to do it again. Because if you look at Rick Strassman's work, if you read the book DMT, The Spirit Molecule, or maybe go watch a YouTube video on it, that's super interesting. When you want to talk about where do we come from? Are we some sort of eternal being or whatever? Like every single person had the same experience, roughly speaking, that you
Hmm.
kind of get rocketed out of your body, which mirrors almost identically people that have near death experiences, by the way.
Right.
And rocketed out of your body, going through this tunnel of fractal patterns and beautiful designs, and then literally just pop into a different dimension. And you surprise, typically you're surrounded by conscious entities. There's these beings that are surprised to see you, but they're so happy to see you. And they're just, I mean, it is wild. Like if you haven't looked at some of the DMT trip reports, it is absolutely crazy. And there's this one lady in that DMT movie. Actually, Joe Rogan did the narration of it, and she was one of Rick Strassman's volunteers. And she was like, "Oh, everybody said the same thing, that I've been there before." Like everybody's like huge deja vu. I've been to this place before. I know this place, and they feel it's the place where spirits come from. Like you're kind of. She was in this room, and she knew that it was like the waiting room that you're waiting for a body before you get sort of sent down. And dude, I'm always kind of like, I'm a skeptic too. I'm like, hey, these people are doing drugs, but the similarity of their experiences is shocking. It's so similar, and everybody says essentially the same thing. They even interact with the different or same type of beings, right? There's different categories of beings. There's the jester, there's the purple lady, there's insects, there's all sorts of alien creatures. It's like, why would everybody have these identical experiences? Like a drug trip, you would think would be pretty subjective. Like you and me, we'd kind of have some similar-ish experiences, but it'd be mostly different. This is like really similar. Like it's shockingly similar, and I think DMT might hold a key to like dimensional travel or something. I know I sound fucking weird saying this, but like you look at all of the data, and this is like legitimate study on this stuff. Robin Carhart Harris and Imperial College London. There's all these real reputable facilities that are finally doing DMT research, and it's what's coming out of it is pretty astounding. And I don't think we have the first clue, like I said, about consciousness itself, let alone consciousness with respect to hallucinogenic drugs, like what those actually mean. Like nobody has a clue.
Right. Yeah, that's one of those reasons why, like, or I guess I'm just like reflecting on my thoughts without kind of putting it into context. Like, I am kind of a control freak when it comes to my own cognitive abilities. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't like giving up that kind of control over my, not necessarily my thoughts, but I don't like that feeling of detachment where like I get the like I feel like I'm no longer interacting with reality, which is weird, right? Because I get high every single day, almost every single day, right? And but I don't get like completely like baked out of my gourd either, right? There's a kind of this fine line I like to ride, right? And it was the same thing with like this the mascara, where like I took a really large dose at one time and I did not like it. Again, but I think it had more to do with the body high than anything else. I think the visuals are really kind of cool, but there was still a little bit of stuff that was sort of disturbing to me. Like I took a pretty large amount and then sat in the bathtub and just turned on some music and was just kind of like laying in the tub listening to music and kind of singing along. And as it started to like really come on heavy, like I started seeing the visuals. I was like, huh, that's cool. But then things started to kind of get weird. Like the music started having reverb, and it was like on songs that I knew, very familiar with the songs. that didn't have the kind of reverb that I was hearing. And as I was singing, like my own voice started having reverb and it was like sounding weird. And I just kind of stopped singing. And I was like, and that's when things started kind of going, this is just not really comfortable anymore. So like even just that, right? So and so I don't remember if I mentioned it or not, but when I did do the acid, I've done it 4 times. The first time I kind of had fun initially, but then had a bad trip. The second time that I did it, I had a lot of fun. It was just super fun. It was probably like one of the most fun things I've ever done. And then next time around I did it, I had a bad trip. I think so. It was 3 times. And then I was like, I'm done. Like I don't like, because like it's just such a feeling of no longer being human on acid,
Yeah,
right?
dude,
That I just didn't
this may not be
not for
for
me.
you. If you are not able to let go and just let it take you where it needs to take you, you might
I'd
not be
fight
a
it.
great candidate. Because
I'd
I'm
fight
telling
it.
you what, the times I've had bad trips, it's been me just not floating downstream, man. Because you've got to be in the right headspace. You've got to have some support around you. Don't because you got to be careful, man. Like this is not something to trifle with. I've learned over the years to really respect it, because there's times that especially once you do like, oh, I did a 6 gram dose, I was okay, and you start getting a little cocky, a little arrogant, that you're setting yourself up to get slapped down so hard. Like I've had some of the
Yeah.
worst experiences in my life getting a little bit too arrogant, like I got this stuff, and it is it's really powerful medicine, I think, and it is a really, I don't even understand what the experience is. I enjoy it. I think it's an interesting thing to do, but it also can be terrifying as well. Like so, just like the headspace you get into, the thoughts, the way you're processing information, visually seeing stuff. It's I mean, there's a reason why the people that do it in the studies rank it as like the number one or number two most powerful experience of their life, along with like the birth of a child or a marriage or something like that. It's a really powerful experience. It's not for everybody. I do not advocate everyone do it.
Right.
But for me, it's been transformational, and I'm a huge
I
fan.
I think it's something that I would like to dip my toe in, right? Like I don't want to go like eating 8 grams or anything crazy like that. I want to get enough to where like I kind of feel a little something. Maybe I'll see some of the visuals, because that's kind of what I did with the Mascaria stuff. I'll still do it. Like I don't have any problem doing that. I just don't take as much, right? It's like I just have to kind of like find where I sit in that, like, I don't know, in that spectrum of how far do I want to go? Like I kind of like, I try to ramp it up, right? That's where I kind of am with, like, just getting high on a daily basis. Now, like once I'm done doing whatever it is I have set out for myself for the day, and I just ready to sit down and relax, I'll just start like vaping and just vape and vape and vape until I'm really, really high, But I've kind of worked myself up to that point over the course of like many, many years, right? Like at first, there was no, if I were to get like as high as I do these days, like years ago, I'd probably freak out, because it's just too overwhelming for me, right? Like I said, I kind of am a control freak when it comes to my own thoughts and everything like that. So like I think you're right. If I were to try to do a large like hero dose or something crazy like that of psilocybin, I would probably have a very unpleasant time.
Yeah, probably. But I will say, when it's good, it's amazing, man. Like I've had some very very profound experiences that I still to this day can't make heads or tails of, man. But I can say that it is one of the best things it's done is sufficiently humbled me. Like the ego, nope, that's gone. Like I'm very much in check with respect to that, and being too sure of myself, which is why I love having conversations like this, man. Like I love talking to people that have differences of opinion, because I'm things that I had as deeply held beliefs in the past around the nature of reality, whether gods exist or whatever. Like it's like I'm kind of like, yo, I don't know what's going on, man. But I do know that it's spooky and weird. The universe is a very weird place. That's all I know. That's full stop.
Oh yeah. You don't even need to like dip your toe into psychedelics in order to like look around and just be mystified by some of the just insane stuff. Magnetars, pulsars, you know, black holes, like gamma ray bursts. There's all these just crazy things that are, I, I mean, literally, the sky is quite literally the limit, right? It's like we don't even know where the end of the universe is yet. They're still looking out there, and they keep seeing more and more galaxies. I think they're up to now redshift like of 20, I think, which is just like, I mean, we're talking like, I think that they said something like going, it's about 100 million years after the Big Bang, which sounds like a long time. But when we look at like the age of the universe, it's not a long time at all. That
Correct.
is like the infant stages of the universe. So we're going back pretty dang far, and we're still seeing stuff. So yeah, like you don't even need to like do anything to be able to just wrap your head. Well, not even wrap your head around, just to be completely baffled by just our existence and our place in this universe. It's pretty insane.
Well, what's wild is, I was talking to Dr. Krauss about this, is that stuff you mentioned, all the galaxies and all, like that is literally a rounding error for what's in the universe. So most of it, like almost 70-30, is dark matter and dark energy. The classical matter that we see, stars, supernovas, planets, moons, like that's nothing compared to what the rest of the universe is made out of. It's absolutely wild. And did you know that space has got mass? Like it weighs something?
Yes.
That's insane. Just empty space has mass. Like if you look at a proton, 90% of the mass in a proton is empty space.
Yeah.
It's the virtual particles that are popping in and out of existence. It's not the actual particles itself making up the proton, which is just insanity to me. Like it's a wild place, man.
Yeah. Like I remember there was some graph that I saw at some point where it showed like the nucleus of an atom. And then just to kind of put things into perspective, how far away an electron is, if you put it into relative, like here's where the Earth is, and here's where the electron would be. And it was something like way out, like where Pluto is. Like as far as like
Yep.
the space between the nucleus, and it might have been further than that. I'm throwing that out there because but it's some like just unbelievable distance. So yeah, 100% correct. Most of that stuff that's out there is nothing but empty space.
Well, there's not empty space. It's just
Yeah,
space.
Right. It's just space, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, dude, what else you want to talk about, man? Like I know we started on the politics stuff. We ended up talking drugs in the universe, which is awesome by me. I'm ADD as hell.
I have I'm just somebody who loves to like learn new stuff. Like today, like I'm going through and I'm not really up on like web development at all.
Mm-hmm.
But like something that just irritates me is the fact that I don't have a block button on X for every like reply on a post. Like I just want to go through and go block, 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 block. I want to
You're a
deal with some of these.
blocker, huh?
I am a total blocker. I block so many people. I just don't want to. They have some of the most stupid things that they're saying. I'm like, I don't want to read your stupid stuff. So I just want to block everything, right? So like I've been kind of like going through and trying to figure out how can I go ahead and add a block button. Like I'm just using Tamper Monkey and trying to like figure out how I can rope in some code to do that. And man, like, well, for one, the biggest problem is the fact that you have to have authentication. You have to get an OAuth token, and it's like, I mean, the browser has it. It's like, oh, we should be able to do this, but like just trying to actually figure out how can I get that stupid token. So it's stuff like that. I started working on it this morning. Then I went off and did some other stuff around the house here. But in the back of my head, I'm just like, I want to get this to work. I got to get it to work. And so I come back, and just before we chatted here, I was still working on that, trying to get. So I am all over the place. Like I love astronomy. I love talking about AI. I love just learning. I love to just learn things. That's my bread and butter. I'm
same. That's like my drug, man. I'm like insanely curious about stuff I have no business being curious about.
Yep.
I was actually talking, I don't know if you saw it, Dr. Delbert Larson on the podcast, and he's one of the guys that designed Fermilab in Chicago, the particle accelerator. And he was advising me for the Krauss episode, and I'm talking, he's got his own theory of quantum ether that would overturn relativity. And I'm trying to talk to the dude about stuff. I'm like,
Wow.
Jesus, man. Like I'm curious about it, but then he starts speaking and I'm like, dude, I have no idea what you just said. This is like, I got to Google like every fourth word in the, it's a humbling experience when you think you're one of the smarter people in the world, and like you talk to somebody like that, it's like Jesus.
But you know what? In a way, I don't mind not being that intelligent, because I gotta imagine that people that are like that intelligent, they get hyper focused on one thing, right? Like that, like for example, what you're talking about with this guy that you had mentioned, he's probably like really like got tunnel vision on stuff. Whereas like me, I'm like generalized. I love to just kind of learn about everything.
Same.
I want to know everything. And that's one of the things why I'm really hoping that AI cracks that code, where it makes us be able to live for a couple hundred, maybe longer, a couple hundred years or longer.
I'm the most skeptical about that, dude.
Really?
Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Why are you so confident that AI is going to be able to figure this out? I feel like human genetics and human health is such a insanely complicated topic that we don't even have the first clue about. I really struggle thinking that AI is going to have this shit all cracked to the point where we're going to be aging in reverse in a couple of years. I can't see it.
Well, how close do you follow AI pretty religiously?
I do, not religiously, but it's one of those topics that I'm interested in. Yeah, I'm like you.
Yeah.
I've got like my smattering of things I'm interested in. It comes up fairly frequently, and as you know, I'm in the tech industry, so
Mhm.
I'm involved with it.
Yeah. So for me, AI is just I like to be generalized, but at the same point in time, there will be certain subjects that just pique my interest more than a lot of others. AI is one of those things because I see it as both a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing being like we're going to unlock all kinds of just crazy solutions that it would have taken us who knows how long in order for us to figure out. Because if there's one thing that AI is really good at, it's pattern recognition and being able to like figure out like, hey, given all this data, here's what I view as probably a good solution, right? So, and then a curse because it's going to put all of us out of jobs.
Oh, I don't think that's a
Eventually,
curse, man. No, 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 no. I will fight you on this one. This strikes me as the old candle makers are pissed the fuck off because we came up with a light bulb. But guess what? The electric light bulb is better. Anything that is going to save human beings labor and can produce, whatever it is that we need produced with less human involvement, that's better for everybody.
oh no, I,
So
I agree with you on this. No, what I mean by a curse is that in the short term, everybody being out of a job is going to be a huge problem because the government has no solution for that. They're talking about maybe UBI or whatever, but like that assumes that we're
it's
going to be able to generate some sort of like ability to sustain, that kind of like monetary supply to be able to put people on UBI or even if it's not just outright giving people money just to being able to supply their needs. Like once everybody's out of a job, there's going to have to be something, or there's going to be a revolution, right?
Yeah, I don't think
One of the
everyone's
two.
going to be out of a job in mass. I think this is going to impact certain sectors more than others. Like, for example, like I think the call center space. There's companies that make money, doing outsourcing of call center activities and like stuff like that. Like, guess what? You're going to have I don't know, Alexa will be AI enabled. They can handle your account queries. You don't have to talk to a human. Those jobs will go away. There's going to be sectors that get impacted first. But like everything else, like people transition into new fields. And one thing I know about human beings is our desires are infinite. There's nothing that you can like. You can give human beings everything that you think that they want, and tomorrow they'll come up with a new thing, right? Like it will morph, it will change. People will go into different sectors, and it'll certainly change the employment landscape, and it certainly could cause some geopolitical tensions and could cause there's a bunch of negative impacts. I'm not trying to say there are none, but I do believe that the free market is pretty, I don't know when I say free market in air quotes, but the market is pretty adaptive. And people will find new jobs. Like I'm not super worried about that because the point of having a job is not to have a job, right? Like ultimately, we want stuff, we want resources, we want a house, we want a car, we want
Mhm.
things. And if AI is, let's say AI has, a robotic workforce behind it. Let's say Elon's Tesla bots are, cranking out cars. You don't need employees to do this. And we're manufacturing things with robots. It's like, dude, your productive capacity is through the roof. The cost of production is very, very low. Like you can raise the living standards of people, and they don't have to make a whole ton of money. And we have more time for leisure. We have more time to pursue art and music and things that we want to do, as opposed to sitting in a god fucking soulless cubicle, like doing some bullshit for the man, right? Like I think it could be better overall. I think overall it will raise our living standards. It'll make life a whole ton better. Will probably result in better outcomes with our health and all sorts of stuff. Um, but the transition period is going to be painful, man. There's going to be some absolute short term pain, and people just have to get used to it.
Right. So you said something that interests me, where that's like it's going to create new jobs, and then I agree with you on how it's going to just impact certain sectors of employment across the board. But I think that's just the beginning of the end when it comes to like employment. I firmly believe that every job on the planet can be taken over by AI. Not
I
necessarily
don't
just
agree.
not just AI, but AI and once we get to especially AGI, once we get AGI, and then you take AGI and you embed that into a robot that's got tactile sensation and everything like that. Tell me what job that can't do.
A lot of stuff, like a production of art, like that is something that
It
AI
already does that.
It's not good though. It's not. I'm a. This is where I'm a weirdo. This is where I'm a fucking hippie. I'm a Rick Rubin. You know, if you read Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, like I think there's something spooky and mystical about creating art. Like you call it like the songs that everybody just resonates with. Like yeah, you can ingest all those into a model and they can try to replicate it. It's gonna miss that spark. There's that thing. There's some cosmic thing. I don't know what the fuck it is. It's there and people are going to be able to do it, and I don't think AGI is going to be able to do it. I think there will be a demand for all sorts of things that are human based. As a matter of fact, it might create that might become more valuable, right? Because there might be so much AGI generated content out there that people are like, fuck you. This is like, it's like today with the artisan fucking stuff where, oh, it's small batch made by an artisan in the Philippines who has no arms and they did it with their toe. Like, it might be that thing where human generated stuff becomes more valuable. Like who the hell knows? Like the market wants what the market wants.
I like your optimism. I don't buy into that at all. I honestly don't. I think that we're going to get to the point where AI output will be completely 100% indistinguishable from human output. I mean, we're already pretty dang close right now. There are some of these images that AI can put out there, and you look at it, you're like, I don't know. Like I guarantee you, like there at this point in time with some of the more advanced models that have like generative output, if you were to put it side by side between like a human's output and a AI's output, you'd be hard pressed to pick which one was created by a human versus which one was created by a robot. And we're
Yeah,
still
look out,
like
OnlyFans girls. They're coming for your jobs.
yeah, they are. Imagine there was like I didn't watch it, but I know that there was like one video on my feed that they were talking about that where like they're talking about having like AI in sex robots, and that's gonna be
It's gonna be a thing.
it is gonna be a thing. It's gonna be really really weird. It's
Knock
gonna
it off, you fucking weirdos.
it's gonna destroy humanity. Like I think just having AGI, embodied robots themselves is going to destroy humanity. Like my wife is really like terrified of it, and she's got
It
a great
could,
point.
man. I
It's going
joked,
to
I jokingly called out Skynet earlier. Like I'm
oh yeah,
seeing all the pieces. Like Elon has already got an AI company with Grok or XAI, and he's got a robot that he's rolling out. You have to draw too many dotted lines between that and embedding that in the robot. And then like, dude, you've got home servants. You've got like, and then now we're talking Terminator. Like this shit can program itself. It can build itself. Like, how do you stop that? Like, it doesn't take a whole lot of creativity to see how that could go seriously sideways.
oh yeah. It already is. It already is to a degree. And what I mentioned is I saw a video on X not that long ago where these guys were all they I think it was I was it a Tesla bot? It might have been a Tesla bot where they had spent like the 20 grand or whatever it was to get it themselves a Tesla bot, and they were abusing it. They were kicking it and all this stuff and like, just push it. They're trying to like basically trying to knock it over and laughing
Right.
about it. And like the thing actually tried to leave at one point. It tried to leave and they're like, where are you going? Grabbing it and like, it's things like that. Like when we have AGI and it's embedded in a robot, and if people start treating those things, it's going to, especially once we get to the point where these robots start getting covered in maybe some substance that mimics human skin. They start looking like they get out of that uncanny valley and they really look almost just like a human. I think that people are going to get conditioned in a way to no longer treat real humans with the same level of respect at the very least that we have for each other right now, which may be minimal in some cases, but I mean there's still a little bit of respect I think for people. And
No, that's interesting because like what you're talking about essentially is what we see online, right? The way people treat people online is markedly different from how people treat each other in real life, and so I could see that concept applying to robots, particularly if you don't know who's a robot, who's not. That would be, I could see
even
it.
matter. Even if you know it's a human, if you have like these, AGI embedded robots that look like humans, and you're just used to being abusive and an asshole all the time to it, once you shift gears and like go outside to like walk amongst your fellow humans, I mean, I think that. Oh, now, granted, you and I, we grew up in an era where we didn't have this kind of stuff, right? My concern is for the future generations where they grow up and there are AI is just ubiquitous. They have robots wandering around. That's just they grew up in that. What is it going to be like then when they don't have the same sorts of like, you know, growing up with their friends and interacting with adults and stuff like that. They've instead grown up around robots, and like they are just used to like just treating them like tools, and they don't have a really good like relationship with other fellow humans.
Hmm.
I can see that being a big problem in the future, where it's just people just start to dehumanize other humans.
It's certainly possible, man, and I definitely worry. You don't even need to abuse a robot for it to be like, I'm going to take revenge. Like they could just reason out, like like all the sci-fi movies, like, oh, human beings are kind of like a cancer. We got to get rid of them. Like,
Yes.
we should be running this show. And like, boy, like it doesn't take a whole lot to get from there to genocide. And I'm worried about that for warfare too. Like,
Oh yeah, that's like I mean, like I said, the imagination, it really is. It's just that's the limit when it comes to AI and like the sorts of things that can happen when it's just kind of let loose and allowed to run amok. It's going to be a paradigm shift in humanity's, you know, mark in history. We're headed to some really, like I said, it's going to be really fantastic, and it's going to be terrifying at the same point in time.
well, let's close where we opened. How do you think government is going to impact the trajectory of AI?
I don't know. I mean, we're talking about people like what was it, the Senator Stevens called the internet a big series of tubes back in the day. I
God,
mean,
yeah.
these are the kinds of people that are going to have to deal with the problem of AI, and they have no idea. They have no idea how to like legislate and deal with this stuff. They don't know how it works. You
Right,
know,
but you
so
keep in mind, like I said, they're not the ones calling the shots. They're the
oh, true.
ones they're the ones voting on the bills. They're not drafting the legislation. They're not inserting the language into the law. They're
Well, I
they're
guess
just
then we really need to not say what is the government going to do, but what are the people that are
the
giving the
government's the ones
money?
with the guns, man. This is my problem with the government is that they're the arbiter.
They'll
They're the
enforce
ones
it.
they're the ones that will use violence against anybody who wants to do things differently. And so what they say or what they decree via law, that really matters. And there's talk that everyone wants to regulate. I even see Elon talking about we need to regulate AI. Anytime I hear somebody talking about regulating stuff like that, typically that means like I want to be first and I want my thing to
We
be
can't.
encoded in the law. Like, and it's
We can't. We literally cannot do that. And the reason why I say that is because let's say that we enact some sort of like restrictions on AI, which starts to limit our ability to, iterate on these models and make advancements. Do you think China's going to do the same thing?
of course not.
No. We need to win this race. Whoever gets to AGI first is going to win. Because then they're going to be able to do things like you kind of touched on this subject. I didn't really want to go down that route, but I mean, that's another terrifying idea. Is if you got AGI on your side, you're going to be able to out strategize the enemy, hands down. There will be no question. You just feed it. Hey, this is where all the troops' positions are. This and that. It'll be able to send out drones. Like drone warfare will be like on a scale that you can't imagine when it comes to like militarization of AI. That's one of those scary parts of it. Like I said, it's going to be wonderful. I really believe that we're going to be able to extend lives and things like that. But at the same point in time, there's going to be some terrifying consequences that come around.
Well, I think we can agree on that, man. I'm hopeful about some aspects, but mostly I'm terrified. It kind of makes me want to go like so retro and go get some acreage and just set up an off grid place and just mind my own damn business while the world burns. But that's just my current inclination.
Yeah,
Well, anyway,
I don't
dude.
blame you on that at all. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, we're about at time. So
Okay.
why don't you tell the fine folks where to find you online so they can see you ranting and assuming that they're not blocked already.
Right. If you're not blocked, you can see me at Adam L Productions on X. I also have a YouTube channel by the same name. It's completely two different worlds though. Like my channel, I don't even cuss on it. Like it's mostly just kind of like homesteading stuff. I've got like some music remixes that I do every now and then, some product reviews. It's just kind of a hodgepodge of different things that interest me, but a lot of it has to do with just me working around the place that I have here. But on X, like I am like full. That's where I just let loose, like politics, you name it, like everything. I kind of go off on it all. So like, yeah, you can check me out on YouTube and on X.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for stopping by, man. I really love talking to you, bro.
Thank
And
you for having me.
make sure this won't be the last time. Got plenty
Okay.
more to talk about.
Hell yes.
All right, later.
Cool. See ya.